Right. So good evening, everyone. I think we can start now since everyone is here and connected. So before I hand over the proceedings to Chapushka, I would just like to mention our partner for this webinar, which is MILO Sri Lanka. And as usual, before we start the proceedings, there is a small video clip that we will need to play.
අම්මා කියනවා පෝෂණය පටන් ගන්න ඕනේ ගෙදරින් කියලා. මේ විටමින් B පෝෂණය දෙන්න උදව් වෙන්නේ මගේ මයිලෝනේ. මගේ යක්කෙත් ඇක්ටිව් වෙන්න. මගේ ෆේවරිට් මයිලෝ තාත්තිටත්.
විටමින් B කොකෝවා මෝල් සාරය දේශීය නැවුම් එළකිරිවල පෝෂණයෙන් සපිරි විශ්වාසනීය මයිලෝ.
ගෙදරින් අරබෙන පෝෂණයෙන් ඉදිරියට.
From Nestle.
That was our sponsor for this webinar, MILO Sri Lanka. So a very good evening to all of you. Thank you for joining us for this panel. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over the controls to Chapushka. He's going to be your moderator this evening. Chapushka.
Thank you, Parami. Firstly, a very warm welcome to our elite and eminent panelists. It's an absolute pleasure and privilege to moderate this discussion on a whole new curveball. As you know, the pandemic has been a complete black swan event, unprecedented in nature, which has had global implications across all industries, which no one had imagined. Sports is one industry that was disrupted due to this crisis, and sports trainers, educators, coaches have integrated with technology and other means to navigate through these challenging time periods. Interestingly, we have 4 personalities, inclusive of sporting legends and icons, sharing their perspectives today, which we all look forward to. A big shout out to our exclusive partner MILO for organizing this sports webinar. MILO is a brand that champions an athlete's winning energy in sports and life. At a time when kids, athletes are still confined to homes and are bored, exercising less than they should, MILO has initiated the movement to bring sports to home and make it the home ground. There is no better time than now to start with a renewed vigor and a great sense of optimism. Let's nourish our ambitions from home. Let's nourish our skills from home. Let's nourish our minds from home. Let's nourish our bodies from home. Let's nourish from home to go further. MILO has also sent a question to be asked, which is open to all the viewers and audience that is tuned in. The question is, what are the natural ingredients from which your favorite MILO is made of? I will repeat the question. What are the natural ingredients from which your favorite MILO is made of? So 5 lucky winners will be selected and 5 valuable hampers will be gifted by MILO. All you need to do is comment your answers on the live stream. So before we commence this much anticipated webinar, there are a few ground rules which I wish to bring to your attention. For our audience, for questions, please post questions in the comments section and it shall be read out to the panelists. If your question has been already answered during discussion, kindly refrain from reposting the same question again. To our esteemed panelists, I shall be reading out the questions and giving the opportunity to each panelist to share their own perspective. There will be general questions directed to have the perspective of all 4 panelists and simultaneously more specific sporting segment related questions directed to each one of you. A time slot of 5 minutes will be allocated for answering each question. Appreciate your kind cooperation towards the adherence of time. So our panelists need no introduction, but for formalities, introducing our distinguished personalities, Mr. Mahela Jayawardene, a world-renowned cricketer. Good evening, Mahela. Thank you for joining this webinar.
Hi, good evening, Chapushka. Good to be with all of you. Thanks.
Great. Mr. Julian Bolling, well-known swimmer that represented Sri Lanka in many international competitions, including the Olympic Games, and presently functioning as the director of Rainbow Academy. Good evening, Julian. Thank you for joining this webinar.
Good evening, and to all of you.
Great. Mr. Simon Newbold, currently functioning as the director of sports at the British School of Colombo. Good evening, Simon. Thank you for joining this webinar.
Good evening, everybody.
Mr. Shamly Nawaz, rugby head coach of St. Thomas's College, Mount Lavinia. Good evening, Shamly. Thank you for joining this webinar.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening.
That's great. So let's dive straight into the questions. How do you think of the present situation due to the COVID-19 virus outbreak, which has had global implications across industries? How is the sports industry affected compared to other professions? You may base your response on sporting events at a grassroots level as well as at an international level. Mahela, we would like to first hear your comments and remarks. The floor is all yours.
Yeah, I think generally all sports have been affected. Slowly, some of the countries have opened up their domestic sports, especially in New Zealand and Australia. The rugby started. England and Germany. Germany was the first to start their football and then followed by England. The basketball season had just kicked off in America as well, almost. Cricket, the guidelines being given internationally. So the first international cricket to be played, I think, against England and West Indies in the summer, starting in mid-July. We've seen teams getting out and practicing in countries where things have been controlled, especially like New Zealand, Australia, but it's winter there right now, so it's very hard for those guys to practice outdoors, so they're doing indoor training. Sri Lankan team, the national team has started training. They had their first camp, they've just off to Kandy for their second camp. I think domestic cricket, it'll take a little bit more time, a few more weeks for them to get the local guidelines to be sorted, because international guidelines are quite different to what you have in their respective countries to have the domestic season. But definitely, I think all cricket activities have been affected. We were supposed to have a World Cup in October, the T20 World Cup in Australia. They still haven't made a decision on that. There's debate. They'll probably make an announcement by next month whether they're going to go ahead with that World Cup or not. I find it very difficult. I think they'll probably push all that to next year, and then try and play the bilateral tournaments, which is like England, West Indies, and Sri Lanka. Is hoping that India will tour here in August for a one-day series, if not try and host the Asia Cup, which is 5-team, 6-team tournament. So those tournaments will try and kick off, but a world event might not happen this year. So yeah, it is tough. I think a lot of the cricketers were struggling because it's a skill-based game. So you can do as much as fitness work that you can do from home and do whatever you can, but because of the skills, they will take some time to get used to it, get back on it. 3 months, no one been able to get out and play cricket. But at the same time, I think it was a good, in a positive way. I think for some of the guys, it was a good break for international cricketers. Otherwise, they've been on the road playing a lot of cricket. So to good 3-4 months break, which I don't think anyone had seen for that many years. And to refresh themselves, anyone who had niggles, to get over those injuries, get fitter and better during this period. I think on a positive way, that's how most of the people have seen it. And I'm sure all the other sports would have probably acknowledged the same thing. So yeah, I mean, it has affected, commercially it has affected tremendously for individual countries. TV rights, sponsorships, everything has to be reevaluated. A lot of people, like in cricket Australia, have lost jobs. Domestic cricket, there are a lot of countries who let people go. So yeah, I mean, we will see all that impact in the next few months to come. See whether how much commercially damaging this COVID-19 has been.
Thank you, Mahela, for sharing that insight. Julian, I'd like to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I think everyone's affected, because they say 70% of the world is involved in sport in some way or that. And I think because group R is the audience, the fans. And I'm a fan of weekends with football or English or Southern Hemisphere club rugby, and I'm missing all that. I am tired of watching replays. So obviously, us fans are affected. It's a big one. I think as coaches, we are either volunteer coaches, we can be coaches who are doing it and where we earn our own income, or we could be coaches who are employed. And if you're employed, obviously, each institution has had challenges financially. And I've faced that personally because we help a few schools, but also as running an academy, we have coaches that we have to pay salaries, and that became a burden. So, and then you have the children or the athletes, and whether you're a professional athlete, whether you are a school level athlete, or whether you had your fun in playing football, cricket every evening, and all that was clamped down. So I think psychologically all of us were challenged. So whether it's the financial or the emotional, psychological factor, in every direction, everybody was impacted. And so it's been a tough call. And you see in different countries being affected differently. To us, on the swimming world, we were quite encouraged to see Italy, who was quite badly affected. It was early, the first week of May, they sent the Olympic swimmers into the pool. And they had a stage-by-stage phases of, bringing swimming back in. And other sports also would have had the same thing. So, I've spoken to coaches in India. They're allowed to go into restaurants and have lunch, but they cannot be out at the pool or on the field coaching. So that's a tough one for them. So every country is sort of opening up in different ways, and the chances are huge.
Thank you, Julian. Simon, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, Lotte reiterates what the gentleman already said. Sport has been affected from the top to the bottom. And I don't think we're just looking at finances, which the professionals and all the brands and the companies involved in, and the internationals, but also just the grassroots students who haven't been able to go out, play their sports, socialise with their friends. The well-being of a lot of children will be affected by this understandable long period of lockdown. There haven't been a lot of students do team sports to play with their friends. Cricket, rugby, football, hockey, volleyball, doesn't matter. They haven't had the opportunity to train with them, to socialise with them, to have those chats with each other. So I think not just financially, and also there's going to be amateur players and students who will have lost fitness. Mahela chatted earlier about skill-based training. Is very hard, particularly if you're in a team sport. You can do certain individual things, but if you're not training against somebody else in a game of tennis or cricket or rugby or whatever, it's very hard to maintain those levels of skill. So I think coaches, teachers, when we do get access to facilities and training more closely to what we think is normal, we're going to have to look at rebuilding those skills and rebuilding fitness as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Simon. Shamly?
Yes, rugby, actually the Sri Lankan rugby, the club season was ending. So I think the club players didn't get a much bigger effect on this, but they just finished off the season and they went into their off-season training. So they could have done that at their own time. But when it started the school season, it was just 2 weeks of schools rugby and everybody was looking into the school season. And most of the players were really pumping and they were on their peak to go in for a big long season, because Sri Lankan schools rugby is very famous internally. So there's a huge crowd base and everything. So it just suddenly had a full stop on after March 11th. So I think that created a bigger problem on these players, sponsors, because sponsors, every school has a sponsor now. So the sponsors were looking into bigger mileage, especially the Dialogue came in as a sponsor for schools rugby this year. So I think that was a bigger blow for the sport. The boys who were just leaving could not get the season done, so it affected their achievements that they were planning to take. Overall, I think the rugby, they did some fitness training, but the new generation, the younger generation, they are very fit. You don't have to tell them to get fit. So they were doing their fitness alone. They were doing jogging inside home, and we had some Zoom aerobics and stuff doing. So the kids had hope that the seasons will start, and they kept fit all the time. And comparing to the international arena, I think it's a great news that we see some rugby played at New Zealand, and I think everybody's glued to the television. I think it was a great thing that New Zealand got these rugby games going back, because everybody was watching all the retelecasting stuff, and now they see the real new games coming in. Like Mahela said, for rugby was also, it's a great thing having a 3-month break, because there were certain players who had injuries. They have recovered, and in my team I had 2 or 3 players who were out for the season, and if they start in October, I think they will be back playing. So that's a good news out of this 3-month break.
Great, thanks, Shamli. So my next question, I'd like to direct it to Julian, and I'm going to base it on his response as to how he managed the academy during these challenging times. So there would have been a few painful decisions and measures that you likely would have had to undertake because of COVID. There would have been salary cuts, salary slashes. I mean, all industries are undergoing this, trying to manage their cash flows. Have you been compelled to slash employee coach salaries and even downsize? How have you leveraged on, let's say, creativity and other means to sustain the business?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Obviously, at Rainbows, nothing to brag, but we have 30 coaches employed. And then unfortunately, also last year, my brother passed away, and I have taken on his academy to work with his son. There's another 30 coaches. And for us, swimmers don't pay for the term. If they paid for the term, maybe the month of March and April, we would have had some income. So we just went down to 0 income. And basically, I had 1 month's salaries with me. And we used half of it for March. Then we down to half. And then we said, look, and I had a discussion with the coaches, and they basically, the most wonderful thing happened where they came with a solution and said, sir, let's spread it out. Let's take even a bigger cut. So to me, I felt like I'm the most, privileged coach in the world to have employees suggesting and saying, let's do it this way, without me trying to convince them. Then, of course, what is interesting is I have a friend of mine, Dilsiri. He runs a kite surfing center in Kalpitia. He was struggling with his employees. Tourism is down. But since kite surfing is a very interactive lifestyle type of sport, and with tourism, they have a huge fan base. Like the guests to turn up at any point, they get in touch with them through Facebook. And then Dilsiri wrote this nice letter asking for donations. So with his consent, I took the letter and almost copy-pasted that and changed that. But basically, we wrote to our parents, all of them, and said, look, this is the situation we are in, and to kindly help us if you can in any way. And there was a huge response. So that came in. And right now, so we've just started our academies. We got the local THI's approval. We helped even the sports ministry from our club, because when we heard Italy, like I said before, they opened up, they gave a lot of guidelines, what Italy was doing. Then we studied that. We looked at the US system, what they were doing eventually. And I've helped them also to drop this whole thing is about COVID and what's the protocol of kids coming in, adults swimming and using the pool. So, yeah, so we opened up. The squad swimmers are back, the adults are back, the younger kids who are learning how to swim, that's like almost our bread and butter. That's very slow still. You can't blame them. Last year, we went through the same situation after Easter Sunday incident. And for over a month, I remember these kids didn't turn up. You can't blame them. So, so we are right now in a decent wicket because our coaches are willing to go through this journey. And I think it was Ali Baba, the guys in China, who had mentioned there was a little of that went for 2020.
Julian, you're on mute. Hi, Julian.
Sorry, I had a call coming in. I need to apologize. I don't have a laptop. I might be the one few people who don't have laptops. So
No
it's
issues,
just a
no
call
issues.
just came in. So what was that question? Sorry.
No, so what I wanted to ask is during the time of COVID, there would have been salary cuts or there would have been downsizing that would have happened. I mean, how did you manage during those difficult times?
So we obviously took the salary cuts, and as a director, I decided not to take any salary and might not take one for a long time. But the salary cut is, I would say, it's almost a 70% cut. I don't want to put the rupee value into it and go public on that. But so nobody lost their jobs. They were all. I used to be in touch with them. A lot of our coach instructors are from the villages. Majority, 90%. So we used to have, they were introduced to the Zoom thing and we used to have chats. We even celebrated coaches' birthdays. And so it's almost like we had this thing that they were on board to, face the challenge. I call it, it's a tsunami, it's a wave, it's a massive wave. Let's just go through it. And so everyone's there. And now since we started, we've taken in only half the coaches and we're going to rotate them every 2 weeks. To be in the pool. So we're just going to finish one batch today, and the new batch has just turned up. So they will then continue to work, and the first batch will now go back to the village or to their homes. So we're going to take, obviously now we have a shift base and this will go on for a while till we feel we can have everybody on deck.
Thank you, Julian. Indeed, this has been a challenging time for everyone, especially if you're in the sporting industry, but it's great how you have navigated during these challenging times. So moving on to my next question, I'd like to direct it to Shamly. I'd like to leverage on his previous answer related to the school's rugby league. So COVID-19 was spreading and escalating just after the commencement of the school's rugby league. Considering the recommencement of the school's rugby league and competitions, possibly towards the latter part of the year, it could be a hurdle with the ordinary level and advanced level examinations that students must face parallelly. Do you reckon the priorities will shift, and how do you maintain the same level of intensity and focus? How do you uplift the levels of motivation and bring back the momentum?
Yes, Atushka, that's a very good question, because now the Education Ministry has postponed A-levels, advanced level examinations to September. So we were thinking of having it in August, but it is now in September. So now the boys actually who are playing under 20, that is the last year boys, majority will be doing the A-levels. So I am in a college that has London A-levels. So I think few of my boys are doing London A-levels, so they have more time. But all the government schools who are having their A-levels, all the teams will be having boys who are doing their A-levels in September. And if we are planning to start the school tournament in October, then there are few boys who have just made it to the under 20 teams who are just doing their O-levels this year. So that's a mix of a squad. In Sri Lankan rugby, there is certain boys who just come in and certain boys that go out. So both groups are getting affected by this change of time now, because usually the schools league and the knockout, everything will be over before A-levels. So the A-level boys have about 1 month's time. So now it's really challenging for a coach to get the maximum out of the boys who are doing their A-levels and keeping the boys who are focused to do their O-levels, ordinary levels in December. So this is the challenge. But for me, actually, you can't get both. You cannot give the boys to do their A-levels full and get the maximum output out of the sport too. So we are thinking like, okay, like Julian said, let's get the sport going again. So we will have backup, because we will have to promote some under 18 players, under 16 players into the first 15 teams and develop that area as one unit. But this will be a common for all the teams. So everybody will have this problem. So we'll have to get around this and make our teams to play in October or November with these boys not in the team. So that's going to be a challenge for those boys. Certain boys are saying, okay, sir, I'm good at my education, so I will play and do my O-levels. I said, no, because O-levels is a huge hurdle, because if you get through your O-levels, you're good to go for another 3-4 years without any problem. So boys want to get in and play, but I think my advice for the boys is, okay, take a break. Next season we will play. Hope you got that.
Thank you, Shamli, for your open and honest feedback. My next question, I'd like to direct it to all panelists. Education has integrated with technology and leveraged with online teaching platforms. Corporate professionals have leveraged on Microsoft Teams and other video conferencing platforms to conduct meetings virtually. Similarly, when schools, corporates reopen, they could very well look at a blended model, face-to-face interactions as well as online interactions. But with sports, that would not be the case, where certainly preference would be given to physical interactions and engagements. But with the ongoing social distancing and health implications, sports will be the last thought of, especially grassroots level sports with parental anxiety and psychological emotions coming into play. Even students, children would have a tension in getting back to learn, getting back to team sports with the regulations in place. What is your perspective and take on this? I'd like to start with Mahela.
Well, I'm sure Simon would be the best one to answer with the guys in the school, but I think for us, we had a couple of interactions with some of the boys that I coached with Mumbai, because we were leading up to the tournament and all of a sudden it stopped. It was a good opportunity for us to have a chat and talk about the mental preparation and their focus, and maybe even after COVID, with cricket starting, it might be a different outcome in the sense that they might have to play on empty stadiums without any people watching the game. So that will be a completely different atmosphere to what they're used to. So we had similar chats on that and to see how they do that. But like you rightly said, I think you can only do a certain amount on Zoom or whatever as coaches. The most important thing, like you had to train, you had to practice, especially a game like cricket. It's outdoors. You have to be skill-based and try and get that going. The only other positive aspect is that you can work on certain things on their thinking game and their tactical part of it, and send certain work for them to think about. I'm sure the national teams would have done that. And preparing for a World Cup, getting a little bit of homework done on other teams. So those kind of tactical stuff you probably can do, but not a lot. And I think it's mainly skill-based. So that's where sports is quite different to corporates and various other aspects, how you can, change and adapt to the certain situations. But it's very tough for active sportsmen to be taught things virtually. You have to, be able to be on the ground and work with them day in and day out.
Thank you, Mahela, for sharing that pragmatic perspective. I'd like to hear Julian's thoughts.
I think there's been a huge new opening on this whole, technology and this whole Zoom thing. One is, I think, Shamli and I, we follow this coaching curriculum called three-dimensional coaching, which helps us to look at not the physical side, but the psychology and the heart values of an athlete and how to reach out, especially to the heart of the athlete. And this was happening prior to the lockdown, and Shamli and I were always saying we made a couple of attempts to say, let's meet up for coffee once a week to try and have a coffee, relax, and then talk about our coaching. And since he and I love this topic, but we always found it difficult to meet physically. During the lockdown, we kept talking about this, and today we have, so every other week on a Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, now we have over 50 coaches on a Zoom chat. We have Mark Hull from 3-Dimensional Coaching who said he will volunteer to lead us in that topic. And now we had coaches from India, from Nepal and Maldives coming in. So yes, some of the physical things, obviously we can't do at, over a Zoom, chat. We need to get back to the arena. But I think a lot can be done through this, and it's almost like now I'm so looking forward to this Wednesday midweek huddle to chat, and I must invite Mahela to join us. There's Ruan Kalpage Mahela who's with us, and Shamly is there. So we are now on a Zoom because it's so difficult to physically meet and talk about life, things like this. So for us, it's been a massive evening. If a coach is, once you go out in the field and you come back, hopefully on a Wednesday, you can sacrifice an hour with your kids to be with other coaches. So that might be the only asking. But physically, we're not together, but on a Zoom, and fantastic stuff is happening where we then have chats and break into room chats. And so, yeah, it's been a massive experience for us on this line.
Thank you, Julian. I'd like to hear Simon's thoughts.
Yeah, obviously, during the lockdown period at school, we were doing online lessons, and all our coaches were also using technology to provide opportunities to the students to continue the activities after school, the teams, etc. So majority of it was fitness work. It was sports skills that you could do on your own, but we also started to try and include some knowledge about the sport, some tactics, some strategies, so they could look at the mental side of the game as well. It was predominantly fitness and individual skills. The coaches have learned a lot because they've never really done online work before. Some of them set up their own YouTube channels and did videos and posted it on there. Used a lot of YouTube resources, because since the lockdown around the whole world, there's been a fantastic array of resources. The hardest one probably was swimming, because you couldn't get in the pool, but there was lots of dry land activity, etc. Moving forward, the big challenge is going to be what is imposed upon sport. We've mentioned social distancing, all those sort of things, but I think we're going to have to look at our procedures. We are certainly as a school over the holiday, because we're finishing school the end of this week, because we follow the Northern Hemisphere calendar year. We're going to have to look at how we can reintroduce students in. Are we going to have more hand washing stations? Can students share equipment? We'll be able to use things like sharing bibs, things like that. We're going to have to look at the whole procedures. It's going to be very much I think Julian mentioned earlier, a drop and go sort of situation. Kids come in, they use whichever facility is, then go. You're going to have to look at changing rooms, toilets. Can spectators, can parents stay and watch? Is that increasing the risk? A lot of that will depend upon national legislation. And obviously that's not come forward yet. But some colleagues of mine, international schools or in Asia who are already opening up, those are sort of things they are having to do. They're having to do lots of social distancing exercises in playgrounds, etc. They can't do close contact things. So things like rugby, football, etc. haven't happened as yet. Things like badminton have. They've adapted games, etc., because you can get those distancing in. The other issues, every country, as Mahela mentioned, every country's got different things. Even the social distancing is different in every country. Some countries are 1 meter, some countries are 2 meters. So there's lots of things you need to look at, particularly people in my role and Julian's role who are in charge of organisations, to ensure that coaches are trained and understand what we need to do to protect our charges as students and the people coming in to do our clubs and sports. And that will eventually change. But initially it's going to be hard and it's be very different experience for people, not just students, anyone coming back into sport.
Absolutely. Thank you, Simon. Shamli, I'd like to hear your perspective.
Yes, Atuga. Actually, use of technology was the only source of getting interaction with the teams and the players who were with us. So we actually, the younger generation, I have always been telling them that they know more ways of getting around this technology and doing social communication and stuff. So my boys actually, they did, when we started, they liked very much to do their individual training on Zoom and stuff. But while after first week, they lost the interest because they wanted to meet together. So then they had these 5 boys getting into one place and having the distance and putting a camera and doing it. So I think it is good, but to a team sport like rugby that you play together, it was a bit a challenge for us. Then now, of course, we have come into a stage that we have numbers coming into the gyms. So the whole team, a rugby squad is about 35 players, but the whole 35 will not come. We are breaking it down and they are coming into the gyms. Like Simon said, we need to have systems to manage these children coming in. Like now, the boys, when the curfew was lifted, we instructed everyone to do a 2-kilometer run. So they were running on their own, but certain boys complained wearing a mask and doing a 2-kilometer was not feasible for them. So they had to pull it down. So there were situations we adjusted from every point. We were also, the coaches was also learning. And one thing that we did is we got my assistant coaches, we broke up the squads and gave them areas, so they were talking and they were communicating through social media and stuff, so they had that communication. But I don't see any big change coming into rugby because rugby is a total contact sport, and even the World Rugby has given us some guidelines, but I don't feel you can work 100% on those guidelines. Like Mahela might know that cricket, they has told you can't use speed, but it will, I don't know how it will help the sport. So the batsman is not going to hit the ball and not going to touch it. So you can have systems for that also. But rugby, I think it's a contact sport. So they first brought in to play without scrums. So that didn't work out. Now we see in New Zealand in Super Rugby that they have this whole game going on in the full contact situation. But these players are tested and they are monitored very well before the game and everything. So I think contact sports will be the last to start in Sri Lanka, and it will be after the government institutions give the green light. But as coaches, we are doing the training using social distancing and methods.
Thank you, Shamli, for that insight that you share. My next question, I'd like to direct it to Julian. This is something which Simon touched on as well. So with regards to swimming, it's a sport which is more challenging to integrate with digital technology and deliver a training program as such, with the necessity of a pool facility. How did you navigate through this period, and when was the academy reopened?
Obviously, legislature, like we look for the national, what's the health ministry saying, and we got to follow local procedures. So the health ministry did give out a circular that was about a page and a half. But like I said, when Italy opened, we started studying their system. So we started creating a document that we are going to use for us at the pool. And funny enough, when I went and met the doctors at the Ministry of Sport and kind of their friends, so I said, I need help. They were like, well, they need help. And then I said, look, this is what we've done. How can we go about it? So this document that they have come out with now, quite late, has more to do with the sport than what the health ministry has given, because the health ministry says, look, just be 1 meter apart. And we know that practically in the pool, you can't have kids being a meter apart so we've done a lot of social distancing. So at the start, we are using a 10 square meter or a 5 meter by 2 meter a square area per swimmer. So each lane where we put our lane ropes and swim, now we go up to 6 swimmers, which is about 8 square meters per swimmer. But they don't finish together on the wall. If anyone knows the sport, when you train, you got all those kids in that lane stopping together in that one corner, shallow end or the deep end. Here they have their designated spots in the middle of the pool. So we made those changes. We know WHO and everyone said that chlorine sort of kills the corona. So we maintain the chlorine level, which has been suggested by the Ministry of Health. And the biggest challenge for us is the changing rooms, or are the changing rooms. So our kids, it's out of bounds. Changing rooms are out of bounds. They have to keep their stuff outside. Designated areas around the pool, 2 meters apart, is where they can have their stuff, their clothing, and they wear their mask. Now the health ministry, for example, brought in a rule saying soap and shower before getting in. So now what do we do? So our pool is a touch-free zone. So we turn on the showers. We have 4 swimmers. We have four pillars with 4 showers in each pillar, but we only turn on, now 2 showers per pillar, 8 swimmers in at the same time, and then they soap shower, come out, then we send the next 8. So there's a little bit of protocol we follow, but we turn the showers on and we turn it off ourselves. Kids who have to go to the toilet, we disinfect it soon after they come out. So our bigger challenge is not inside the pool, but outside. So we started with 2 swimmers per lane. That was a massive social distancing. They're 25 meters apart, which is great. And they, each swimmer takes 1 corner. Then we slowly grew. We made it 3 swimmers per lane, 4 swimmers per lane. And our norm is what Italy says. If you go with the local norm, I can put 25 swimmers in a lane, but that's not practical because they say it's 1 meter distance. So we have now stopped at a 5-meter distance, 4 to 5 meters. And we feel it's very safe. But I've told the coaches, think Corona, think COVID, think of the virus 80% of the time, 20% coaching. Not that they coach 20%, they coach 100%, but I said be vigilant. And we got the local PHI's approval. That was a must.
Thank you, Julian, for sharing that insight. My next question, I'd like to direct it to Mahela. Mahela, you did touch on your opening remarks as well that it's uncertain considering the world arena, considering international cricket, when there would be an actual resumption of cricket. Related to that, how do you keep the revenues afloat during these challenging times at sporting events with the regulations, social distancing measures in place? How do you attract spectators to follow these sporting events? I'd like to get your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think cricket's going to start. July is going to be the first tournament, and all the bilateral tours, they will go ahead unless certain countries cannot facilitate that. So they will get competitive cricket going. One thing is for sure is you won't be able to get people come into stadiums until we have some sort of a pathway where you can manage that. I don't think we can come back into normal international cricket where people come in, watch cricket and enjoy and go back until we find a vaccine for COVID-19. So until then, we need to manage things the way it is. People are starving, like Julian said earlier, people are starving for live sports. So obviously you're entertaining people at home through television, through digital media and all that. So I think that's the way forward for the next 6 months or 12 months at least. So that's what every sport has to adapt to. Players have to adapt to playing in closed doors, but have the same intensity and compete. Financially, yes, there's going to be drops in revenue, sales and all that, but at the same time, you will get TV money coming in to a certain extent, but that will be to a lesser amount depending on the sponsor's ability, because I know a lot of the companies are burdened with salaries and cash flow. So the first thing they will probably take out is their promotional budget for the next 12 months. So obviously that's going to affect international sports through all boards, and everyone will get impact. So that's what I said, it'll have to wait and see the next 6 months for the financial impact for international sports, how bad that is going to be. So for the time being, you need to be able to, develop a structure where you spend money on necessary things of maintaining your elite athletes, maintaining those standards, maintaining the activities, and rather than spending on capital expenditure, hold on to your money, because you don't know how long that will take for this to turn around, because you need to hold on to your coaching staff, you need to hold on to your workforce, you need to hold on to your cricketers or any other athletes, contractually. So those are the challenges that sports bodies will have going forward, depending on the financial burdens. But right now, you don't see the impact because, everyone's just, it's been 3-4 months. The actual financial burden will come in the next 6 to 12 months when sponsors and everyone else tighten their budgets and spending. And then you will find out that the money coming through, even through TV rights, will reduce for some of the international sports.
Thank you, Mahela, for sharing that insight and feedback. I'd like to direct my next question to Shamly. We have an audience which has tuned in on our Facebook live stream, and this is an audience-related question directed to Shamly. Shamly, as a school coach, if the senior team is a pool of 18 to 20-year-olds, should the school coaches look at having a pool with more junior players as a general approach? It would also give more exposure to the juniors.
Yes, actually, school now under first 15 squad is about 35. So every school will have about last year players, about 10 to 15 players plus who can play for another season, who is in grade 12, 13, grade 12. There will be another 10 players, 10 to 12, and the rest should be juniors. I usually have a mix because I think about the long-term development process, and I get some juniors are going on the first 15 squad. So it's a mix actually. But only thing is now with this situation, the mix is not very good if you are going to play it in October, November. So those boys need to go and get through their exams. So I think this season now, if you go to do those development in this season, I think you're going to disrupt 2020 season plus the next year season also. So I think we have to just get through this 2020 season, then think about the 2021. Hope I covered that.
Absolutely, Shamli. I hope that question was answered as well. My next question, I'd like to direct it to Simon and Shamli. How do you inspire athletes to be active at home? I mean, there could be certain limitations in sports-based activities that are practiced at home during the period of COVID-19. Restrictions in a proper environment. Students' children could be living in apartments with no access to a garden area. Are you able to provide an equal opportunity to all? How can home be made the home ground with all the possible limitations? I'd like to first hear Simon's perspective.
Okay, obviously that is challenging, regardless of the student. Everyone has different facilities, etc. Some of the students may not even have a bit of equipment available, may not have a cricket bat in the house, etc. What we tried to do was ensure that it was accessible, so anything was done. We had alternatives. If you didn't have cones, you could do something else. You've seen on YouTube lots of things of sock balls and all that sort of thing to replicate balls, etc. So we encouraged that to happen. I tried to have as many of the coaches actually post videos themselves rather than using other coaches on YouTube. Students like to see their own coaches. They're inspired by their own coaches, hearing them talk, giving them advice, rather than someone from another country they don't know the advice might be exactly the same, but if it's coming from someone they know and trust and value, it's going to give them more. So that's basically what we tried to do. We encouraged them. We didn't make them do it. We encouraged them all to do it. We also encouraged other students to also get involved, even if they weren't involved in that team. So if they weren't doing it in the under 13 cricket team, they were encouraged to have a go as well, to try it out, etc. So that's how we really try to do it. It is hard because you've not got that. Even here, we can all see each other, but it's not quite the same as sitting all together. That social interaction, you miss a few bits and pieces. So it was hard, but that's how we tried to do it.
Thank you, Simon. I'd like to hear. Yeah. Shamli, go ahead.
I think Simon covered most of it, but I just have to mention 2 points. When we were giving instructions to do it in online and stuff, one day I was looking at one of my junior coaches have posted a small assignment, and the boys are doing it, and he has not touched on the safety areas of this thing. So I can see a boy jumping up and landing on his back on a concrete floor in a video. So I said, immediately I called that junior coach and said, you need to touch on, because actually certain coaches give messages, and one of my Julian knows him, Johnny, we had a chat that day. He has told, send a sidestep video to me. And about 10 kids have sent sidestepping in rugby, and 4 or 5 guys have sent sidestepping dancing. So the message goes in a different way. So as coaches, when we also learned that by doing it, because we realized that we have to give correct safety measures and correct instructions to get the things done. So I think as coaches, we also learn few points on this time.
Thank you, Shamli. So we have another audience question which has come through, and I'd like to direct it to all panelists. Sports is not only physical, or is it? Hence, can't they use the post-lockdown period to groom and enhance the areas of mental, emotional aspects, especially through 360-degree coaching? I'd like to first hear Mahela's thoughts.
Come again?
Sports is not only physical, or is it? Hence, can't they use the post-lockdown period to groom and enhance the areas of mental, emotional aspects, especially through 360 degrees of coaching?
Well, I don't know. I mean, different sports requires different attributes. I think, toughness, be able to, like rugby is quite different. You have to be instinctive in making decisions out there in the middle. Cricket is pretty much the same thing, but you have a little bit more time to adjust. So the mental aspect of it is, yes, it's important, but without training, without putting them through those scenarios or situations, it's very tough for a coach to teach that mental side of the game as well. Yes, you can talk about it. You can explain, this is how it's happening, but without having experience of either playing matches or practice environment, putting them through those situations, it's very difficult for anyone to learn that mental aspect. So it's finer things, there are certain things you can touch on, and that thinking ability, the capacity of understanding certain things tactically, how they can adapt to certain situations. We can all talk about it. Video analysis, you can send them little clips and get them to go through that and all that. But it's much more practical when they're actually on the field and win that. So you can do certain things. It doesn't matter whether you do 360 or whether you do 450 or, whatever range that you can get to them. But it's just every individual student, every individual athlete is unique. That the way they think is different. Because everyone, if it was same, it will be a very boring place. The world would be. So they all have their unique identity, and you need to, as a coach, you need to be able to understand that and then work with them on that basis. So I think it's very tough when you're doing it through virtually to get those things across to them. So certain things you can, but I don't think you can get many things done during a period that we went through.
Thank you, Mahela, for sharing that insight. I think that covered the answer in depth, but I would like to give the opportunity to the remaining panelists as well. In addition to what Mahela said, is there anything that you could add? Julian?
In general, I think Shamly and I, since we talk about this three-dimensional coaching, this gentleman talked about the 360 degree. So is it the whole life coaching? And, there is this radical question that can be asked, and it'll be like, we'll say at my funeral, right? Let's hope not. Hopefully it'll be a long way from now. But, the athletes that I've coached are going to obviously come, and they're probably going to say, you know what, this guy was a horrible coach, or he was a good coach. No, I won't be able to hear it. But now the thing is that if they say he's a good coach, they're going to say, look, Coach Julian helped me through swimming and I was able to win nationals. That was a physical achievement. Because of, being involved in swimming and with the coach, today I'm a lot mentally focused. I'm lot more disciplined, which is psychological. Or they'll say, you know what, because of this coach, I'm a good dad at home today. Now, here are three questions that, so all three are important. We do sport because of the physical. We love the physical. I know the Tommy and juniors rugby players were asked the question, what do they miss most? And the first thing they all came up, and I was sharing this with Shamly, is I miss my friends. Second is I miss the tackling part because that's the nature of their sport. Third is they miss their competition. It's fantastic, and these kids are enjoying sport. And as time goes along, and obviously as a professional athlete, your demands are different, your needs are different. But we got to think as coaches, what is our primary purpose of coaching? And, and try and figure this out, because I think all we see today, dear Mahela now sits with, the government trying to solve problems. And I think whether it's an administrator or whether we coaches, and then to a great extent, the parents of young athletes, we have lost the plot. And should we now go back to the drawing board and try and figure out what sport is all about? So there's a little tagline that caught my attention, and we used it on my brother's academy. Sports for all, play for life. So try and see whether we can be more inclusive of all athletes, all students, to have a chance of being part of sports.
Thank you, Julian, for that insight that you share. Simon, I'd like to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things we've talked about are the character building aspects of sport that everyone wants and likes to do sport. And a lot of the time, these are taught discreetly. We're doing skills and fitness, but all the values that all the sports, and every sport has slightly different emphasis on different things, the etiquette, the social side of things, the honesty and all that sort of thing is taught discreetly. It's quite hard to teach or coach that by this sort of method, etc. But having said that, because of restrictions which will be put on us initially, I agree with Julian, we're going to have to look at what we're going to be doing. My philosophy has always been, I've been doing this for a long time, over 30 years in school sport and coaching, and I always view my success is where the students continue with their sport when they finish school. And I've been fortunate enough to teach international sportsmen, Olympic sportsmen, as well as captaining in England, captaining the local 16 cricket side. People are still continuing sport. And to me, that's the sign of my success. The process in which we take the students along to get there, depending on where they are, the elite, they also want to play, just enjoy their sport. If we have success along the way, it's because we've got our processes right. Success shouldn't be, like winning trophies at school, shouldn't be the end or anything. as Shamili said, bringing students in to get the experience of playing first team, all those sort of valuable things we do, which is harder when we've got social distancing and Zoom. But the long term is people being healthier, fitter, enjoying a better social life. We're all here because we've got something out of sport in different ways and different levels. And we've got something out. We're having conversations about sports. And that's what we should be giving to our students and our kids. And if we do it correctly, they'll get success along the way.
Thank you, Simon, for sharing that feedback. Shamli?
Yes, I think now, like Mahela said, the physical part is very important in a sport. But after this COVID-19 situation, I think we will see without the physical part how these boys have developed for the past 3 months. I think we'll see, like Julian will see, swimmers might be doing their styles, freestyle and stuff correctly because they learned it online. And there will be other areas like cricketers who has academies will be playing their shots that they were not doing really well. They might be playing it well because they might learn online. So overall, I think for me also, it's still I have not met my team together, but I feel that these young boys would have learned something new online and using these social media areas, and they will, because now I see one thing is these young children, they love to play video games because they get to express their feelings, they get to do what they want in these games when they get in. So they get very creative, they love it. And I think if you can get that into the sport also, they will start loving it and doing it, because mostly coaches and parents want their children to be like them. So that's becoming a problem of continuing the sport. Most of the players, they drop out after 13, 14, they drop out of the sport because they are forced into a sport or a area by parents or coaches that they don't like. So then they want to express what they like and they go into these games and stuff. So I think there will be better sports person coming out when they can express their feelings more on that platform.
Great, thank you, Shamli. There's one more question, an audience question that has come through to Mahela. Mahela, can you say anything about the tri-team cricket format that going to be introduced by the South African Cricket Board?
I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with that. First time I've heard that. I probably missed out on my reading the last few weeks. Is it a domestic tournament that they're talking about, or is it international?
I hope we can get some clarity on this as well, Mahela. So I would like to request the viewer to actually repost the same question with more clarity. But anyways, thanks, Mahela. There's one more question that is directed to you again, Mahela. As a sports person, I would like to know Mahela's perspective on why sports development in Sri Lanka is something so controversial. I'm presuming. Okay, go ahead.
No, I understand where it's coming from, but I think rather than going just talking about cricket and whatever has happened in the past, but I think generally with all sports, I think we need to have a national policy. I think that's where we struggle. Without having a national policy and a direction, how are we going to develop all sports through the respective bodies and the involvement with the government, with the sports ministry? Because what has happened is over the years, the sports ministers keep changing, the people in the respective sports bodies keep changing. And with that, the policies, the decisions, everything changes. So the direction that someone has taken 5 years ago is no longer the direction that someone else wants to do right now. So it's quite difficult for a country like ours to then navigate through all these different versions. I think we need to, everyone with knowledge, with in-depth, understanding of each and every sport should get together, and with the decision makers, the policy makers, sit down and start a pathway. How are we going to develop school sports as well as national sports? And that has to link at some point as well. I think that is the most important thing. I think the way we train in certain schools in different sports, the techniques that we use is not the national techniques that we use at the national level. So that link has to be there. So that pathway needs to be there, because schools, the sports at school level with different sports, I don't know, swimming and rugby and all that, is governed by the education ministry. So the national level is governed by the sporting body, and then the first class, like in example for cricket and all that. So that link has to be bridged, and then we need to have a national policy. So even if you have different governments coming in, different sports ministers, different people heading different sports bodies, everyone knows this is the national policy, and this is something that we need to evolve with, and this is a part. So I think that's my opinion. I'm sure the others might have different ideas about it, but I feel that without a national policy on all sports, how are we going to move from year 1, which is today, to year 5, to year 10, to year 15? How are we going to develop national sportsmen and women representing Sri Lanka? We need to have a policy, and that has to be a guideline for everybody to follow.
Thank you, Mahela. I certainly think you answered the question in depth. Moving on to my next question, I'd like to direct it to Shamly and Simon. Good nourishment at home is important in staying active at home, and to go further and maintain immunity. A balanced diet, eating on time, staying hydrated is important, especially at a grassroots level. I would like to hear your thoughts. I'd like to start with Shamly.
Yes, now nutrition is a big part in a sports person's life, because now there is this supplements and stuff also coming in. But I think we focus a lot on natural food stuff, and because like Julian always says, Manyok and Batala, those stuff are the best, because when we get Fijians to come to Sri Lanka, they are one of the best rugby players playing country. They eat all those stuff in Sri Lanka, and they play the best rugby. But Sri Lanka is filled with natural foods like Manyok and Batala, and we are not going into those stuff. So I think a balanced meal from the age of 6, you have to have a balanced meal, and you need to push that. Because once I knew that this one swimmer that Julian was always talking about, who used to eat a huge rice from home, and he used to eat that and swim. And he actually got selected to the national squad, and he went really high on the ladder. So the word itself says supplement. When you say it's a supplement, like it is not the main meal. So it's very important that you have a very healthy main meal, 3 meals a day, and then go in for the other stuff.
Thank you, Shamly. Simon, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
I agree with Shamly. Obviously, a very balanced diet is important. I think with the lockdown, there's been a lot of information being put forward in various countries about food, because people couldn't access food they wouldn't want to, couldn't get the takeaways all the time. Suddenly you're having to cook from scratch, which is much healthier and better for you. People are eating more vegetables, reduce their meat intake. So a balanced plate of food with carbohydrates, protein, fiber, plenty of water to hydrate yourself. That's essential. Reducing the salt and sugar intake, but that's not just for sportsmen. That's something we should be teaching the students, all students. value for life, because it is about long life and longevity. You get a good diet when you're a child, you continue that. Your bad habits, I have bad food habits, I'm sure we all have some bad food habits, but it's limiting those bad food habit times and carrying on throughout life. That's just sensible information to give students and everybody, really.
Thank you, Simon. So we've covered majority of the questions that were lined up, and we have the final question. Do you believe there is a bright perspective for the sports industry in Sri Lanka? How would each of you personally think your field of sport can develop better after COVID-19? I would like to hear your concluding remarks, final advice that you may like to share with the audience as well. Mahela?
Yeah, I think for cricket, I think it's going to be a trial and error for a while with international cricket, in the sense that, like you said, there's new guidelines and how effective those to be. But sooner the boys get on the field and start playing cricket, we won't understand. We haven't had any cricket so far. So once the first international game starts, the domestic cricket starts, everyone will understand, how we can evolve and improve. Hopefully, schools cricket will commence from October onwards. October, that's the talk. Nothing's confirmed yet. It'll be a new season. I think we need to be practical, but still at the same time we need to make sure we're developing, sure that it is looked after, the first class structure is looked after, and like I said, financial burden is the most crucial aspect that cricket needs to focus on. They already have a big structure in place, coaching, development, looking after a lot of things. And going forward in the next 2 to 3 years, if the sponsors, if the TV rights, if the commercial aspect goes down considerably, then they'll have to look at ways and means of how to sustain and manage all this, because it's a massive operation. So those are things that they need to look at, and then at the same time see how best we can evolve and improve, as the game evolves every day, as a national team, as junior programs and everything else, to get ready for the next World Cup and make sure we try and win another. That's the ultimate goal for the team.
Thank you very much, Mahela, for that captivating response. Julian?
Yes, I think the virus was here or not, Sri Lanka is doomed in sport. We'll have our Olympic sports. The last 2 Asian Games, we're going to come back with new medals. And 2 Asian Games ago, we won 2 medals thanks to cricket. But cricket is, it's not an Olympic sport, but thanks to them, we brought back 2 medals. The biggest problem here, I think, is that our authorities are hoodwinking the public, using the athlete for their benefit. What I see as one successful story in Sri Lanka, which might not be the best system that we have, but it's very successful, is the A-level exam. You go to any part of the country, any town, any village, you will see hoardings of tuition masters and teachers advertising. The entire country is focused, and there's a huge amount of competition. We would want to replicate that in the sporting world. So I see 3 things that are happening there. See, the problem in sport is we are waiting for the minister to come, new minister to come, do something new. In the education ministry, it doesn't matter which minister comes, the O-levels will not change. The A-level exam. So there are 3 things. Mahela, I know I asked Jeevan Mendes, like, when is our domestic cricket in Sri Lanka? The calendar. I also don't know. Now, me as a Sri Lankan, I know when the English play the domestic cricket, when the Aussies play the domestic cricket. So these 3 points one is that the calendar is set. If you look at America or in the European countries, the sporting calendar is set. In cricket, we see that happening, but not in our Olympic sports. The other one is the incentives. The A-level exam has a massive amount of incentives, the target of getting into university. We don't have proper incentives here. It's not consistent. The third thing is transparency. No minister can put their child into campus. What do we see in our sports? It's just unending. So if we put those three things, I personally feel the calendar, the rewards, and transparency, we will compete between us, within us, and up the game. So I think, it's not a COVID problem. I think Sri Lanka has to seriously look at this and not wait on the next minister to come and rescue us. Like Mahela said, the national policy, simple. You don't need a minister then.
Great, Julian. I mean, thank you for sharing that insight, as it was engrossing as well. Simon?
Yeah, obviously from a non-Sri Lankan looking in, the two things actually Mahela and Julian have already mentioned. The first way is the pathways. I struggle to see where there's some fantastic talent in a lot of sports at school level, whether it be international schools, national schools, state schools. There's a lot of sporting talent. I struggle to see the pathway to the national arena in whatever sport. There seems to be, you seem to just go from school to there. There doesn't seem to develop, progress in between. I might be wrong. I'm sure some sports do, but it just seems a lack, more emphasis put on a national competitions before get to the national level, etc., higher profile incentive there. So that's one area. The other area, and I agree with Julian, is calendar. I've noticed calendars aren't set, they're not kept to. I mean, particularly in swimming, Julian, you know how often the national pool is changed. We have a swimming date for schools, and then you get to 2 weeks and it's moved, and it's moved again, it's moved again. That's very difficult for elite sports people to train and prepare for. You're building up your training for a certain event. So you will pick certain events in a calendar year to train for. And if we keep changing the goalposts, that becomes difficult for the students. Also for the coaches to plan and prepare. Whether you need to look at a more school level, sometimes I think some sport is too all year round. Whether that doesn't mean they can't do pre-season training, fitness, all that sort of thing, but maybe concentrate. Cricket is, like in England, cricket's played realistically from April through to September. That's a very distinct season where it seems to be played all year round here. Whether we can actually help the students out, reduce injuries, burnout and all that sort of thing by having calendarized seasons that don't change. There is a lot of talent here, but I don't feel it gets to the right level it needs to. Not because of the coaches, I just think systems aren't in place and things need to be prepared and planned for.
Thank you, Simon. Shamli?
Yes, I think actually Sri Lanka is a very talented place. Like Simon said, we have so much talent in our athletes. But only thing is, like, they don't make it to the real top. So we have to understand, like Mahela said, the national policy, there's a big issue in our national policy. So we need to create a good policy. Now, when I take rugby, I have seen rugby coaches change. I have seen rugby administration change. And our rugby is not doing really well at certain tournaments. Then they come back and do it again. But there is no proper policy where we want to go. Now, rugby, we can go for an Asian medal. We can even go to the Olympics now with rugby. But do we have that vision to get there? Rugby is an Olympic sport, sevens. Fiji won the Olympic medal. So I think Sri Lanka, if we get together, if all the sports and everyone get together and work as a unit and have a good policy where we want to get in another 5 years or 6 years, a target, then we will end up a little bit short even. But we know that we have a policy and we are going on that road. So we need to work together to build this, because with this COVID situation, I think most of the athletes were so much energy was just lying in home. Now I think it's time they get in and start working and getting more medals for the country. So everybody has a target now, so we need to work together. like it is not going to be easy because like Mahela said, sponsors will drop out, the money will, but I think to do sport you don't need real money. It's the passion and target that you need to go. Most of the athletes, they come, I have seen athletes with very poor backgrounds, they come and they go up the ladder really well. So I think it's all commitment and passion. So let's work together and build this.
Thank you, Shamli, for those concluding remarks. So that's a wrap that concludes our webinar on a whole new curveball. I'm extremely thankful to our distinguished panelists for joining this webinar, sharing valuable insight and information. We sincerely wish you all the very best in your future endeavors. Back to you, Parami.
Right, thank you, Chatushka. So once again, I would like to thank everyone who joined us, our panelists as well as our attendees. So a big shout out once again to our partners, MILO Sri Lanka. And before we conclude, we have another very small video clip for you.
අද දරුවන්ගේ ලෝකේ හරිම තරඟකාරී. වේගවත්. අපි හිතනවටත් වඩා. දුවට අරමුණු දිනා ගන්න. එයාගේම දක්ෂතාවය අභිබවා යන්න. දවස පටන් ගනිද්දිම අවශ්‍ය සමබර පෝෂණයට මයිලෝ දායක වෙන බව මේ අම්මනම් හොඳින්ම දන්නවා.
දරුවාගේ ප්‍රතිශක්තිය කරන පද්ධතිය මානසික ක්‍රියා සහ අස්ථි නිසි පරිදි පවත්වා ගැනීමට දායක වෙන විටමින් C යකඩ සහ කැල්සියම් අඩංගු මයිලෝ සමගින් පෝෂණයෙන් ඉදිරියට.
Good food, good life.
So once again, that was our partner, MILO Sri Lanka. And with that, I think our proceedings today can come to a close. Once again, thank you so much, Simon, Shamli, Mahela, and Julian for joining us. And thank you so much for all our participants as well. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.